Hello, I'm Skylar Pyle, Editor-in-Chief for the Signpost at Weber State University, and we have a special guest joining us today, Kevin Quealy, a graphics editor at the New York Times. He's a visual journalist who explains, illustrates, and contextualizes the news for the newspaper and nytimes.com. Kevin has helped create some of the Times' best-known graphics, including the All the Medals Olympic series, visualizations of the 2010 congressional elections, and the interactive budget puzzle. While Kevin's been on staff at the New York Times, the graphics department has won many national and international awards, including the National Design Award for Communication Design. Well, welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great
Wonderful.
to be here.
Now, are you familiar with Weber State at all in Utah?
This is my first time at Weber State. Last year I was in Park City, working actually, unfortunately, and I was working with and interviewing the women's national ski jump, like the Olympic ski jumpers. The women, this is their first time they were able to do that event. Yeah. So we did I got to interview them on camera, and we did some like high resolution photography and video. That's about it.
Very nice. Well, working in Park City isn't such a bad gig, right?
It is when you're doing 18 hours a day, but yeah, people seem to be enjoying themselves otherwise.
Well, what made you want to pursue journalism? That's
a really good question. I guess I'd always been sort of interested in making things, right? And I think part of our presentation that we're going to do later today is sort of the idea that anybody can be a journalist. All you really need to do is be a curious person, and I've always been a curious person. That's part of the reason I joined the Peace Corps after college, and I went in to get a graduate degree in journalism because I was really curious, and I really wanted to learn how to make stuff. So that, for me, that meant a lot of, for sure, reporting and writing like all journalism students everywhere do. But it also meant things like how to make a website, and how to make interactive stuff, and how to shoot video, and like basically like cut audio, sort of take advantage of the new multimedia skills that were really arriving at the time, which is about 2008.
Wonderful. So how does it feel to work for the New York Times kind of in general, and then just being one of the nation's most trusted news gatherers?
Sure. I mean, I will be the first to tell you that I am currently working at my dream job. So when I went into graduate school, after about a year, I said, I want to be a graphics editor at the New York Times. The things that they do are amazing, and I basically worked with that goal in mind, specifically how to work there. That said, like all journalists, one of our most cherished traditions is complaining, and we always talk about like astronauts going to space. Sometimes they're like, oh, I can't believe I have to go to space today. So we also take advantage of that opportunity to complain. But it really is it's a great place to work right now, and it is changing. Even in the last 6 months, it's changed more in the last 6 months than it has in the previous 5.5 years when I was there. So it's really, people are really engaging the digital product there, and they're really getting behind it, and that's really exciting.
Wow, well, congratulations to you on already being involved with your dream job. That's fantastic. How close in collaboration do you work with, I'm sure there's a majority of staff members in different departments that you work with, but as well as with reporters. How close in collaboration do you all work together?
We work very collaboratively across desks. So it really depends. Our department is really big. It has, depending how you count, between 25 and 40 people, and they have a wide variety of skills. We have people who are cartographers, we have people who are traditional reporters, people who have been editors for a long time. We have two people who between them have made like 50% of the open source internet with like Underscore and D3 and Backbone and CoffeeScript. So we have a wide variety of skills, but that means that we need to work together both with each other and across desks to really take advantage of everybody's skills. So for example, I guess the first thing is that we don't really consider ourselves like the tech people or the artists or anything like that. If you ask anybody in our department, the first thing they tell you what their job is that they're a journalist. So we consider ourselves reporters too, and we are the people who, we write all the copy and all the content that goes in our stuff. We don't say, hey, I made this pretty picture, can you put some sentences under that? That is absolutely something we do not do. That said, we do work with like people who have expertise in that area. So for example, when there was a plane shot down over the Ukraine, we have expert cartographers and people who are really good at finding and mapping, looking at satellite imagery. At the same time, we'd be foolish not to talk to our reporters who are both stationed there, who are going there, but also the foreign editors who can help us understand the political implications in the background in that region and everything like that. So we work very closely across the desks.
How big is the staff at the New York Times?
Again, that depends how you count. I think ballpark, there are about 1,000 journalists in the newsroom. So that means everybody from people who are political correspondents working across the world to people who are clerks in the newsroom, to photographers and writers and reporters and editors. So I think that's more or less right. We'll say around 1,000, and then give me plus or minus 250 or something.
Wonderful. What is the most important thing that you consider when creating a graphic?
That's a great question. There are two answers, I guess. What I'd like to be able to tell you, this is true, is that the most important thing is what is the most important thing that I would like to tell somebody? And frequently that helps us edit our stuff to say, maybe say, for example, I'm working on, we did this piece about the World Cup, about the United States was going into its third game, and it was playing Germany, and the other two teams, Ghana and Portugal, were playing each other, and there was this strange situation where if the United States lost, they could still win if Ghana and Portugal tie 2-2, or it's some crazy scenario. But so if we were editing that, if I could only have your attention for 2 seconds, I would say, here's what needs to happen, or whatever. So that basically our most important thing we do is to focus that singular idea. How can I convey this information most clearly to my readers? For us, it's frequently with a table or a chart or some sort of structured information or some sort of visual. But at the same time, we do write. Sometimes the best way to answer that question is with words, and we definitely do a lot of writing. The other answer to that question is the most important thing that we're thinking about when we're making a graphic is, when does this need to be on the internet by? Our deadline. Yeah. So our deadlines they're crushing, and they're always on us, and we are, so basically those two things work together. What's the best way to do this, given the constraint of it needs to be done by 4 o'clock?
We actually looked at the World Cup graphic that you had done yesterday, and wonderful job. I mean, it was so interactive, and I did notice the one thing on Argentina, how it was completely down at the bottom until they pretty much came into the ending game. But how do you go about gathering that information? I mean, Facebook is it's like a massive tool to be able to use. However, to be able to get that information and then decipher it, how do you go about doing that?
So the first part of that question is how do you think about approaching that idea to say, and it goes back to what you were saying before about curiosity, to say, I wonder, because you're watching the game and you always hear that say Brazil and Argentina really don't like each other, and that the World Cup is in Brazil, and the one thing that Brazilians, after they cheer for Brazil, they cheer for anybody playing against Argentina, right? They really don't like them. So just to have the idea of how can here's this news idea, which is, I wonder who's cheering for who, and then to sort of think about how can I find structured information that might actually answer that question for me. So in that case, we had to think to ourselves, where is a place that some person in the world might make their preference for a country known in a structured way? So for one way to do that is with surveys, to say I can call you up, and in the same way that we survey people to say who you're going to vote for in the presidential election, we can survey people in Colombia to see who are they cheering for. And we actually did do one of those online surveys with a company called YouGov, or with a group called YouGov. But in this case, because some insane number, 1 in every 13 people on the planet has a Facebook account, we thought, it's a crude measure, but it has millions and millions and millions of users behind it, so it might be a decent way to measure that specific preference. So we got in touch with them. We have a pretty good relationship with Facebook, and they know that we are good at working with data, whereas maybe if they work with other reporters or other journalism groups, they just want a fact, right? We're saying, I'm ready. You can give me we can speak with them at a statistical or a developer level, and that means that we get much richer information from them, and that we know what to do with it. So we approached them and said, here's what we want, and then it was just kind of a back and forth. And then once you have that, it's just a way of honing that idea and presenting it as clearly as possible.
Sounds like the New York Times has some really good resources and tools to be able to use.
It doesn't hurt.
Collaborating with Facebook,
One thing that a lot of journalists will say, and this is the hardest time for me to ever be a reporter when I was in journalism school, because no one would ever call you back, Or in fact, when you call them, you can hear them just being oh God, why the stupid journalism students calling me?
How long is this going to take?
Exactly. But when you're the New York Times, it does help. Your phone calls get answered very promptly.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure that they do.
Your email like into the abyss to say like some random Facebook account, like that gets forwarded to somebody important quickly, and yeah, so that is good. I mean, that is one benefit of working for a large platform like the New York Times that has a history of doing it right. So, and that is something that credibility, every time you publish, that credibility is on the line, but that really is something that can back you up to say, if someone's hesitant to give you something, whether it's information or whether it's just like a source or to hand over data, to say, look at our track record. We didn't get to this position by burning people, and that has definitely helped us.
Wonderful. To get a little bit deeper into your kind of process, tell me a little bit about how you foster your creativity.
That's a good question. I sit next to one of the most talented journalists on the planet. Her name's Amanda Cox, and my first step whenever I do anything is to say, hey Amanda, like, do you hate this idea? And most of the time she'll be like, it's not the best idea. And so like frequently, like that's just one way of saying that ours is especially in our department, more than I think any department at the New York Times, is a very collaborative environment. It's a very flat structure. So we have our boss, Steve Twenis, and we have he has a couple assistant directors, and then there are 40 people who are like equals, and we can collaborate. Like I can walk over to someone who has a PhD in cartography and say, hey, what do you think of this map idea I just had? Or I can talk to somebody who is really good in statistics and say, is this correlation that I just made completely bunk, or something like that. So that structure really helps foster creativity, but mostly it's just like having a culture of openness and experimentation. So some of the things that I'll be showing in the presentation today is this idea of sketching, which I think is the thing that sets our department apart from any other graphics department in the world, is this idea of the process that we have of making charts. We're not saying like, oh, here's a data set, I have a tool that will make a map out of it, and therefore I will make a map. We'll say, I wonder what this map would look like, then we make it. Well, I wonder what this would look like if it was some weird flow chart, then we make that. Basically the idea of making like 50 things and then picking one of them. And that is really like at the core of our process.
Now, same with, we were just talking about the collaboration and communication with an entire team, and it sounds like, with the 40 of you, there's quite a lot, and then, I mean, all of the journalists as well included. So would you say that the majority, do you bring a lot of your own ideas to the table and create your own style, or do you work in collaboration with reporters and create more of your processes to create things for their stories?
That's a good question. And it's, the answer is both, and the answer is that it's changing a lot. So I will give examples from both. For example, we have a lot of people who are experts in financial journalism. Someone like Jonas Serra, who now has a business column, or someone like Floyd Norris, who does he's been writing about the economy since literally before I was born. So if they have an idea for a story, and I use this example a lot, and they say, this thing that just happened with credit default swaps is really important, and I think we should have a chart with my story about credit default swaps. I am an expert. Where we say, you're probably right, that chart would be pretty good. I will make it for you. This little chart will go here, and you can look at it and not approve it, but you'll say, this is meant to go with your story. At the same time, most of the things that our group is known for, whether it's most of our big interactive projects that are really popular, come out of our best ideas come from ourselves. So most of the things that I've been working on at the Upshot are things that we have just pitched. So we are, again, this goes back to the idea of we consider ourselves journalists. So we do definitely, when there's a big story, a very famous one from a couple years ago was called Snowfall, which was a very rich multimedia story that started with John Branch, this reporter. I think he wrote it over the course of 9 months, but then he was very collaborative with us. But again, this was his story, but we made it something that it could never have been on its own. At the same time, so that's truly a cross-desk collaboration. But other times, frequently, we're just publishing things that we think of. And specifically with this group that I'm working on now, which is called the Upshot, we almost exclusively work on our own ideas.
Wow, sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of pressure too, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it is a lot of pressure. So what would you say is your favorite part of your job?
That's a really good question. I think I always say that's a good question.
Yes, you do.
It's just the thing that I have.
The thing, yeah.
But they are. I think one is that because I work in news, sometimes, I mean, a lot of things are planned. And to say, like, the World Series will be this week, we should do something about the World Series. Or there's an election tomorrow, we should have our election maps ready. But really, a lot of times we have no idea what's going to happen that day. So I can come in and I could think I'm going to be working on one thing, but instead something will happen, and all our resources will be diverted to this other thing. So I think that's really interesting. And just because the medium and the actual like idea of digital journalism is changing so much, just the idea, it's really cool to be on the cutting edge of things and to just make things that no one has made before. Or one of our projects that we just published was it's an update of something we published last year, but it is a statistical model hooked up to a live NFL data feed that analyzes NFL fourth downs in real time. So if the Packers had a 4th and 2 and they punted, and this statistical body of maximizing points, the statistical idea of like when coaches should maximize points, if that is against what the coach did, we have a Twitter account that tweets in real time saying the Packers should not have done that, with a link to a play with a deep assessment that's completely automatically generated. And like, that is totally wild, and it works, like it's made for your phone, so while you can watch the games, like that is something that we could never have imagined even like 5 years ago. That is just crazy. And so we get to do stuff like that all the time, which like working with technology in ways that have never been done, and working on like communicating on devices that, like what does it mean to have a mobile website? Or what does it mean, what is a news article really supposed to be? Those are like really interesting fundamental questions about journalism and communication that we are answering for the first time for ourselves, and that is really exciting.
Wonderful. Well, to bring us back to the reason that you're here at Weber State, what are you hoping with your presentation that the students will be able to take away from it?
So I love talking to journalism students, especially because I was one, and I, in a way, empathize with the idea that I am going to graduate in X years, and I would like to be gainfully employed in the field of journalism, right? So I'm really happy to talk with students about like what they're learning, what they're thinking about, what they're worried about, or like what's a good thing to learn, what's not. And a lot of our things that we need, we're hiring tons of people. The New York Times, in fact, I tell people that it's never been easier to get a job at the New York Times if you have the right skills. Yeah. We just hired someone who's like 23 years old. It was her first job, you know what I mean?
Fantastic.
And so if you have the right skills, it's a great time to work in the field. So I'm really excited to talk with students and to answer their questions and to get them excited about digital journalism. And I'm just like excited to sort of see, how like a student newspaper works, or see how like journalism is done in a community like this. So I'm definitely always happy to talk to students.
Wonderful. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us
problem.
Today. And it's been a fantastic opportunity to talk with you today and take the time to come to Weber State and meet with the Weber State Media Group. That's all that we have for you today, Wildcats. Remember, you can watch us online at any one of our Weber Media Group websites, wsusignpost.com. Thank you for watching and have a great day.